Hello, demons, fae, and those in between. This is Dizzy, and I will be doing a one-shot entitled, Wait, We Aren't Dating? This is like I said, one-shot by Fieryjeanne, also known as Justletmein. I will have the name down in the description so that you can actually read it and you can just plug it in. This is on AO3, and real quick, here is the summary, in which Senku believes that he had been dating Gen since the observatory. So this doesn't have any warnings. It's about 3,000 words long, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Come to think of it, even since the beginning, since before I met you, I've been rather fond of you, Senku-chan, setting aside personal gains. As if gifting him an observatory wasn't enough, Gen had to go and make his confession right there in front of everyone. Senku wasn't one to beat around the bush, quite the contrary, but what was he supposed to answer? Yeah, I guess I'd like you too? Lame. However, before he could think of something better, Gen continued. I'm sure it's the same for the other villagers. Great way to disguise it, but he still didn't know how to answer. You might say that's cringy, though. Senku smiled, grateful that the mentalist had given him an easy way to confirm that he shared his feelings without being overly corny nor dramatic. Yeah, that's cringy. If he was being honest, he had felt a little nervous with the idea of dating Gen. After all, they had a war to win, and they certainly didn't have time for those kinds of things. However, he was also aware that there was no point in denying that he actually liked the bastard, and that pretending that he didn't would probably bring more harm than good. As a result, he concluded the most logical thing to do was to accept Gen's confession and hope that dating wouldn't affect their already busy schedule too much. Turns out it didn't. Gen continued to act the same as usual. He could always find him close by, except when he needed extra hands for labor, and talk his ear off about his plans. They were still sleeping in separate futons, which is fine considering they also shared a room with Chrome, and it would be awkward otherwise. He wasn't even more affectionate. No disgustingly sweet pet names besides the usual Senku-chan, no attempts to hug him or hold his hand, not a single kiss. Nothing. And he was grateful for that. At first. The lack of it was gradually becoming a distraction on itself. Was Gen waiting for him to take the initiative? Or was he just doing it on purpose to annoy him? Knowing him, both options were equally plausible. Whichever it was, he wouldn't give in easily. It wasn't that he was shy, nor anything like that. I simply had more important things to do. Hey, don't you think Senku-chan is acting a little strange lately? Gen asked once Senku had left to work on some blueprints with Kaseki and Chrome. It was the first time, at least since he had realized it, that he could be apart from the scientist. For some reason, he had begun to request his presence more often, even when Gen had little to nothing to contribute to whatever he was doing. Of course, he liked being around Senku when he worked. It made him curious, and he always answered all his doubts. However, it was usually him who decided to approach, not Senku calling him out or even dragging him away. Like that one time he pretended for him to understand his instructions for that toothpaste? Huh? What are you talking about? Kohaku asked as Suika turned to look at him curiously. Well, how could he explain it? He doesn't seem to want to let me be alone for a minute. Didn't he just leave with Kaseki and Chrome? Suika pointed out. Yes, but it's only a matter of time before he... Mentalist, what are you doing there slacking? We have work to do. Senku interrupted, just as expected, although he was a little surprised that he had finished talking to Chrome and Kaseki so quickly. Gen gave the pair an exasperated look before answering. Coming, Senku-chan! As he walked away, resigned to his fate as a lab assistant, he heard Kohaku tell Suika, doesn't he realize that his boyfriend just wants to spend more time with him? He sighed. Why did he think they could be of any help? Ishigami Senku and Fieryjeanne will go to hell together. Man, Gen was relentless. What is that supposed to mean now? It almost sounded like marriage vows, but they were far too busy for that. Not to mention the fact that they've barely started dating. And yet, he found himself smiling, words flowing easily out of his mouth. Gen told him his plan, which was, as he expected, brilliant. It was funny how surprised he was when he easily agreed to it, but it also made him feel the need to tell him, as sentimental as that might sound, how much he trusted in him. Lucky, Chrome interrupted. The decision to make Gen the driver of both the car and the take were merely because he was the only one with a license. It most definitely wasn't an attempt to keep him as close and safe as he could, which, at the same time, had nothing to do with how worried he had been when Gen left to deliver the phone to Yuzuriha and Taiju. Nope, not at all. Besides, it didn't matter anymore. They had won the war, or at least negotiated a ceasefire. He was grateful that Gen also convinced Tsukasa to wait until tomorrow to search for Mirai. After all, there were injured that needed to be taken care of first, though thankfully none in serious condition, and certainly everyone could use a break, Senku included. Once he was sure that everything was in order, or as in order as he could be, Senku decided, or rather Gen did, that he could take a break from his duties as village chief to get clean. He should have known that upon returning, he would find the village celebrating the end of the war. The atmosphere was upbeat. Lillian's music was playing in the background, and you could smell both food and alcohol circulating. Surprisingly, he was able to identify some members of the former Empire of Might, chatting animatedly both among themselves as well as with some members of the village. It didn't take him long to find Kohaku and Ruri, who seemed to be having a conversation with Nikki, surely marveling at the resemblance the two sisters shared with Lillian. He passed by Chrome, who, upon asking Ukyo questions about modern times, had stopped to greet Yuzuriha and Taiju. However, his gaze kept searching until he stopped at the mentalist, who was together with Suika narrating what had happened to a group of children and elders. Yuzuriha was quick to notice this, a soft smile spreading across her face. So, Genkun? Taiju gave her a confused look before turning to Senku for an explanation. He just smiled. Is it really that obvious? He asked, not bothering to give Taiju an explanation. He would eventually understand what they were talking about. Yuzuriha nodded, though then she seemed to reconsider and shook her head. Yes, but not at first glance, she tried to explain, smiling. Have you already told him how you feel? It wasn't necessary, he replied, laughing at her surprised expression. He confessed on my birthday. He? You are dating? Taiju finally connected the dots and jumped for a hug. This time, Senku was unable to dodge it. I'm so happy for you, Senku! Yeah, let go of me, big oaf. I can't breathe. Of course, all that commotion caught the attention of the mentalist, who gave them a curious look. Is everything all right, eh? Gen asked, as he felt all their eyes on him. Taiju let go of Senku, who immediately took a deep breath and started running towards Gen, arms outstretched. Congratulations! Gen soon found himself being lifted off the ground and squeezed into a painful hug. He understood that Taiju was happy for the end of the war and that being able to be next to his best friend again, but what did he have to do with it? Let him go, you're going to break him, Senku scolded him, although he couldn't help but smile at the scene. Fortunately for Gen, Taiju listened and released him, leaving Gen staggering as soon as his feet touched solid ground. Come with me, Senku said, taking him by the arm, an action that almost seemed to be an act of mercy to help him regain his balance, until he began to walk away from the couple. Are you enjoying the party? He asked after releasing his arm. Absolutely, Gen replied, recovered enough to give him a satisfied smirk. It was more than evident that he had been behind it. This was all Kokuyo-chan's doing. Sure thing, he said, grimacing when he saw that Gen had already tucked his hands under his sleeves. Gen didn't really understand what was his problem. He had that habit for a long time, and, for that matter, Senku had worse ones, like picking his nose in his ear. Okay, you win, Senku said, earning a questioning look from Gen, especially when he saw him extend his hand. What are you talking about? Are you really going to make me ask for it? He asked, annoyed, his face taking a reddish tone. Had he been drinking? It will be necessary if you want me to understand what you want, Gen said, because, if he was honest, he had no idea. Senku sighed in exasperation. Just give me your hand. Gen didn't bother to hide his confusion, but he still obeyed, overcome by curiosity. He waited to see what Senku would do next. Maybe some experiment that required hands? He had no idea, but Senku had the tendency of saying the most unexpected things, and for them to make sense in the end. However, the only thing that happened was that Senku had took his hand and continued walking, looking away instead of giving him an explanation of what he was up to. So? Senku-chan, where are we going exactly? He asked, realizing that they had already gotten quite far away from the boisterous party, entering the forest. Senku finally stopped, standing in front of him and taking his other free hand in his. Senku guessed this was a good moment. The celebratory atmosphere after the end of the war gave him the pause he needed to finally take that step in the relationship. He knew they'd be busy afterwards. There was still a lot to do if they wanted to return civilization to its former glory, but he felt that it was okay if they took some time for the two of them tonight. Can I? He asked, his voice sounding slightly anxious to his own ears. Anyone else wouldn't have noticed, but it was Gen he was talking to. If there's anyone who can do it, it's you, Gen assured, as a small smile spread across his face. It didn't escape Senku that he was probably remembering the time he asked for a cola in exchange for his loyalty. While he wasn't one for sentimentalities, he couldn't help but find it quite appropriate for the moment, the beginning of their alliance. They really had come a long way since then. It was certainly all he needed to hear. With renewed confidence, he smiled back at him and finally leaned in for a kiss. It's a shame he closed his eyes before he could notice Gen's confused expression. What was that for? Gen asked, pushing him away. A kiss? Senku answers, clearly confused by the reaction. I know that, but why? Was he kidding? You said I could. I thought you were talking about saving Mirai-chan. Huh? He analyzed Gen's expression, noting how red and agitated he was. It wasn't a joke. I'm sorry? You should be. What were you even thinking? What was I? Gen, you're my boyfriend. Of course I want to kiss you. He said bluntly. I'm your what now? What? Stop playing dumb. I'm not. We aren't. Gen took a deep breath, evidently in an attempt to calm himself down. Where did you even get that idea from? You confessed to me during my birthday. I didn't! Gen explained, his face completely red. You didn't? No! Senku was silent for a moment, processing the new information. So all this time, Gen had done those things because what? Something most definitely didn't make sense. Then, why did you give me an observatory? It was a thank you gift from the whole village, not just me. But you orchestrated everything. You even went through the trouble of calculating my birthday. Who the hell does that? Well... Senku raised an eyebrow, watching the mentalist, lost for words for once. This was interesting. Not to mention what you said that day. That... I just said I admired you. Sounded like a confession to me. In fact, he had been convinced that it was, and now, despite the initial discomfort, he was beginning to suspect that, indeed, that it had been the case, only that Gen himself hadn't realized it. Well, there was also the possibility that Gen had honestly done it out of admiration, in the name of friendship or something like that, and that now he was simply nervous about the misunderstanding. He would have to find it out somehow. Well, you see, I don't... But Gen wouldn't be so nervous about a misunderstanding like that. He would laugh, maybe even tease him a little bit, but instead, he seemed to be seriously considering running away from him. He could only hope he didn't, because he knew it would be impossible for him to catch up. What about going to hell together? Anyone would think those were wedding vows. He smiled in amusement, against scandalized expression. Wedding vows? That was not my intention at all. Are you sure? Once again, Gen didn't seem to know what to answer. It was too strange that it happened once, but twice in the same night confirmed his suspicions. Gen, you like me, don't you? Of course! You are our dearest leader, after all. You know I don't mean that, he interrupted with a grimace, taking him by the wrist in case he tried to escape after what he was going to say. I like you, and you like me. Isn't that enough? Wait, you like me? Didn't I just tell you that I thought we had been dating for months? Was he serious? Again, putting his initial embarrassment aside, made a thoughtful gesture. Well, maybe you agreed because it seemed like the most convenient thing to do, or to not hurt your feelings? Since when am I that considerate? Fair point, he conceded, putting his free hand on his chin. And what about the other? And what way would that be convenient? Well, I consider myself quite useful as an ally, and taking into account that I betrayed Tsukasa-chan before, maybe you thought that I would do the same to you if you rejected me. Would you do it? He asked, raising an eyebrow. No, I mean, where would I go? It's not like I could return to Tsukasa-chan after what I did to him, and on my own I would be dead for certain. Aren't you going to say something like you care about me, and even if I rejected you, you would never seek to hurt me? I figured you'd rather save yourself from that kind of thing. You know me well, he smiled, noticing the slight blush on his cheeks. Well, except, of course, for the fact that you didn't notice the most obvious answer. That you simply accepted my pseudo-confession because you liked me? Senku nodded. You have to admit that the other two options were more credible, and yet the reality turns out to be different. Gen directed a glance at his hand, which continued to hold his wrist. Sure, if it was about strength, Gen could still break free and run, but Senku hoped the gesture was enough to convince him not to. And now? You tell me. You have been thinking that we were dating for months, and only now you realize that it is not like that. Shouldn't you feel sad? No. I just feel motivated to do things right this time. He smiled confidently. Gen turned his face away from him, trying to keep his look pensive despite the slight blush on his cheeks. What if it's not how you imagined? That is, until now everything was the same as always, just because I was ignorant of our relationship. What if things are different now? I admit that worried me a little before, but different could be good, he confessed, this time feeling the heat on his own face at the smile the mentalist gave him. I see. Well, maybe this misunderstanding was beneficial after all. Gen had finally gotten over the confusion and shyness, returning to being the same annoying mentalist as always. He was lucky that Senku liked every facet of him. Seriously? And how was that? Very simple, Senku-chan. It served to get you acclimated to the idea. I suppose that's one way of looking at it. But for it to be really beneficial, the idea would have to become a reality, right? That's true, he said, pretending to think about it. After all, he could never make things easy for him. Wouldn't it be a shame if I rejected you? I mean, you had your time to process this, but for me it's all very sudden. I'm 10 billion% sure you won't. Gen smiled at him, closing the distance between them until his lips were inches apart from his. So, can I? He definitely didn't need time to process anything if he was already willing to laugh at the misunderstanding. Despite the irritation at the clear mockery of his words, Senku felt more than willing to give in, already tired of running around in circles so much. However, an idea crossed his mind, and he couldn't help but smile in amusement before answering, No. Eh? His expression of surprise and confusion would never cease to please him. I don't think you can save Mirai. You're a mentalist, not... He didn't mind getting interrupted by Gen's lips. Stop laughing, Gen muttered as they pulled apart, making a face that intended to be annoyed, but Senku could tell that he also wanted to laugh. Everything in this situation must have been extremely ridiculous to him. I can't help it, he said, before releasing his wrist to take his face in his hands and bring it closer to his, leaning so that his forehead was against his, and their noses were lightly brushing. I feel happy, he admitted in a low voice, getting a smile in response. I can see it, he laughed, but there was a certain softness in his voice that Senku rarely got the chance to hear. Me too. If you're done, can you take Suika to bed? I have to make sure that magma doesn't break anything else. Kohaku's voice interrupted, causing them both to jump apart. How long had she been standing there? Of course, Kohaku-chan, Gen replied quickly, while Senku gave her a glare. Wait, what do you mean by breaking something else? Kohaku didn't answer, retreating in direction from where the shouting of an obviously drunk magma was coming from. The fact that neither of them noticed them until then spoke volumes. We'd better go get Suika-chan, Gen said, starting to walk, stopping when he felt Senku take his hand. He smiled. Who would have thought that you would be so affectionate? Just shut up and keep walking, he said, stepping forward, but Gen could see the red on his neck and ears. He hoped to be more observant from now on. Okay, this concludes a reading of Wait, We Aren't Dating by Fieryjeanne or Justletmein. First of all, I love this fic. I read this fic so many times. It's definitely one of my favorites. I really like it because, I don't know, I think it's because I relate to Gen a lot. And I know that if I accidentally confessed to someone and didn't realize it, this would be my exact reaction. So it's really cute, and I really like this. I thought I'd do just like a quick little one-shot in between series because my plan is to record another long series after this. But I'm hoping to do at least one or two one-shots in between each of my long fics so that people who don't want to listen to the long fics do actually have something else to listen to. But yeah, please share your thoughts on this golden piece and anything I've mentioned. And don't forget to reach out to the original author, who I will link in the description, to express your thanks. In addition, let me know if you have any recommendations. I'm always looking to add to my horde. Especially if you have one-shots, let me know because I would love to have more of those on my channel. And of course, thank you for listening to this Dragon's Horde.